Oh, what one thing one thing I have in mind here to remind you of is that the best delta neutralizations are kind of what we call fresh ones. That is, bulls have been in control and now this happens, right? And by this happens, this right here, which is a move below neutral. And there's the neutralization, which is a bearish one. And the fact that that happened after all of this, oops, tried to change colors, didn't work. Green stuff, bullish stuff, right? Here's where it shifts. Now, areas, not lines, as always. There's a line at 0. There's a reason why mine's so thick. It's to remind me areas, not lines. For example, this delta went to like plus 37, on the axis. It was positive. Does that mean there's a delta neutralization for the bulls there? We got above it and did this? No, that's not what that is. So look at the big swings, the big rotations. Don't be super quick, even on stuff like this. It's not a picture perfect one. If we did take this short here, just as an example, one of the things that would be on my mind, and I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but I can't help it. One of the things that would be on my mind if I shorted from here was I do not want to see buyers defend delta neutral. I need to see what happened happen. I need to see the sellers take it back through in order for me to really feel confident and potentially make decisions around holding that position and continuing to hold it versus not. Just going through some questions here. Oops, I paused the screen share. I meant to pause the recording. Anyways, too late now. Do you ever take into account the previous session's delta? No, I don't. I've certainly taken a look at that. I do think there can be some nuggets from that, but it's not something that I've settled on applying. But how fun is it, guys, as traders, to get to explore things like that? It really is. Uh, yes, Fabian. The smart question. Of course, Fabian's asking about a NADRO concept of acceptance, and how it applies to it. So absolutely, and really just in simple terms for everyone here who may not be NADRO students, you need to move. Let's say we're bullish above, or we're holding above delta neutral. My concept of that's not a shift, because just because we got barely below 0, that's not a bearish shift. That's a bullish delta neutral. So areas, not lines, is how we want to view it. And what you want to do, therefore, areas, not lines, you want to see a nice move well through the level, so that at this point in time, you can say, yep, we have moved far enough through past 0 that we can consider it one of these fresh shifts, where we could look for one of these fresh delta neutralizations. Okay. Good questions. Oh, I mean, do we need any more real-time examples? Um, this day is almost too good. It's almost like karma coming at me for not doing perfect case studies, because this is like a perfect case study. I'm gonna go to a different day. Let's go to yesterday and see if we can see something different. Um, okay, so good. Okay, good. Overnight session, you got a little one right there. And then it comes back. Now, here's a point I'd like to make. This is a delta neutralization. Is it a fresh one? Yes or no? Let's see it in the chat. Is this a fresh delta neutralization? Got a couple yeses coming in there. No, it's not. Wayne got it correct. Micro's not the term here. That's not appropriate use of that term here. This is not a fresh delta neutralization because the bulls took control right off the exchange reset. They got the delta neutralization. We spent some time in bull land, and then we came back for the second delta neutralization since the bulls had taken it. Only number one is the fresh one. Number two is stale. Okay. So the strongest delta neutralizations, like I talked about theoretically earlier, they come from the shift from bulls to bears and the first one. So in our case, the flip side example is there's the second one, right? Second one's not as good as the first one. Going back to real world, the second one is not as good as the first one. Is the second one still a bullish inflection at number 2 on the real chart? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Is it as strong of a signal as number 1 was? No, it's not. And yesterday didn't give another one, right? We had that big, strong, dominated selling and whatnot. Let's go to one more day. Hive day was delta neutral. Now, granted, not much happened from there. Well, let's start at the overnight session. Here's kind of the first one. This one we could say is kind of micro because it's just such a small little blip. This one is kind of confirming it. The buyers respond from it. Let's call it the third one. The third one they crack. That's a form of a contextual order flow shift from bulls generally in control above delta neutral to bears generally in control below delta neutral. And then we did not inflect. This one was actually, it's not as good because I don't think I've ever taught this concept before. This is what's great about using live charts and stuff versus cherry-picked examples. This would not have made it into my slides. I would have not have thought about this. There's a sense of freshness that erodes over time. This happened at 3 in the morning, my time, and the delta neutral happened at 1 p.m., right? Was that 10 hours? 10 hours later, you get the delta neutralization. So there's a loss of freshness over time. Okay, a little bit of common sense there, but it's important to maybe point out. It was not originally in my slides. But as you see, again, not cherry-picked examples. We're just going through and finding it, trying to draw a straight line there, but we kind of figured it out. One more day, real quick. Initially is just a sell-off. Here's the first bearish potential delta neutralization. In this case, this is a tough one, guys. Why is this so tough? We have to be very fair and honest about these kind of things. This is really still a bearish delta neutralization test because we're coming from below, areas not lines. Yes, if you get really granular, if you get really micro, you could say, yeah, we got above and we held and we went. And with the benefit of hindsight, by the time we're over here, which is the point in which we've moved far enough beyond the area of delta neutral to recognize, okay, bulls are now contextually in control relative to delta neutral, and we do not get a major delta neutralization test. Mark is just off to the races. This is, kind of post-election stuff, it was a very high energy. We can get away with more, right? Going back to some of the concepts. let's I think we're good on delta neutralization. I really do. It would not take us long to continue scrolling through and finding um, delta neutral points, offering inflections in many cases, not all cases. The fresh ones are the best. Sometimes you can give it. Um, I'm kind of glad we looked at this because it's a messy one, right? It essentially took all that time versus the first moment of inflection, which very well could have, maybe triggered some kind of trade from us or whatnot. We'll get into all that. This one's too micro, but as you see, these micro ones do happen. So depending on how short term you want to be with that read and whatnot is important. This is we might come back to this little sequence right here. It's very interesting. Um, anyways, sometimes the overall neutralization takes a bit of time, but this is still, I would say, if we look at this from a zoomed out, nice, big zigzag perspective, it's still a fresh delta neutralization. And so as you maybe battled out with this sequence of the market, let's say if you were looking to be a buyer for some reason, you could take note that, well, the delta neutralization didn't work, quote unquote, from some of these potential turns. But if you see price stabilizing, right, little flaggy with the shift from it, and then here's a pullback, what's going on as we maybe assess, there's a momentum shift, right there, as we assess that potential, let's just say stereotypical entry based on what we know so far, what's going on with order flow? And the answer is we're holding delta neutral. The buyers have just taken control. The sellers tried to take it after buyers previously being in control. So there's an element of chop, right? Because delta's not the power struggles going back and forth. Contextual, we're still in contextual order flow here. 0.1 delta neutral. If you were considering this entry, you could still consider this a fresh delta neutralization. It just took some time. It was just a complex pullback, things like that. Beautiful stuff. Man, I love this stuff. I hope you do too. I just absolutely love this work. I really do. I'm enjoying going through it with you. It's revitalizing for myself and my own trading. All right. Contextual order flow shifts. We're going to keep this one pretty simple. We'll go look at some examples. This one is the most discretionary because it requires us kind of defining a trend in a sense. But that doesn't mean it's not useful. So what is it? In its most simple theoretical form, it is, I'm just drawing the delta here, okay? Let's say the delta was doing this, and then it did this. You guys already know what I'm going to say. If we kind of look at the trend, at some point over here, something is different. Something shifted contextually. The buyers were really in control contextually, right, during this period of time. And then the sellers took over during this period of time. That's a contextual shift. Now, be careful, and we'll get into, there'll be plenty of examples of mistakes that can be made with this. We have to keep this read contextual. So whenever you're considering like the trend line or whatever, you can't say, well, here's my contextual read and here's where it shifts. Buyers were in control and now they're not. That's not a contextual shift, okay? Contextual shifts in my definition have to be a series of up and down rotations. And we're assessing where that pattern changes. That is what I'm defining as contextual order flow shifts. Good rule of thumb is to make sure you have at least one decent normal kind of counter rotation in the order flow before you even consider assessing that read. It is discretionary. There's no perfect way of doing it. And the last thing I'd like to say on this topic before we go to the real examples of it is that large disconnects between contextual price movement and contextual order flow movement is not a signal. So remember earlier I was talking about gold, and I said price can trend higher all day and the order flow can go lower all day. My point here is that is a large disconnect between price and order flow, and it is not a signal. It is not a meaningful piece of information. The only thing it tells us is that this market is being very passively driven, right? And we'll talk more about that later. Contextual order flow shifts. Let's start today and kind of work backwards with some examples. I'm going to make this chart easier to scroll around on. A little too sensitive when I start to move that scroll bar for me to land where I want to land. All right. In a sense, you could say that there's a couple ways of viewing this today. One is you could say the buyers were kind of in control in a sense, right? Something like that. And then at some point that started to shift, right? At some point that started to shift. And in fact, if you look at this from a delta neutral perspective, it's essentially like one of these little trend lines and it's not about precision with the trend lines, guys. It's about getting a sense of what is the contextual dynamic with the swing highs and swing lows. And in today's case, delta neutral actually does that for us. This is defining that point, and at some point over here is where that clearly shifts. And, non-cherry picked example, that led to kind of some downside excursion as we shifted to bearish with that read. So that's an odd example for delta neutral to be that. Usually there's a little bit more movement in these things. Here's a humdinger of a case study for us here on this session. Let's just go find some basic contextual shifts, right? At some point around here, we're going to be saying that's a contextual shift for the bears. Wish I had hotkeys for this. So the second one is really tough. And I'm going to adjust the scale here just so I can get this in view for teaching purposes. Where's the counter rotations? Is that one? Is that one? That's definitely one there, I guess, right? So this is very atypical. It's pretty difficult to, it's just a straight line movement for a really long period of time, right? For 2 hours. So, hey, it is what it is. That's a form of contextual shift, even though it's not a really good one with nice counter rotations to define that kind of trend. But hey, but then we get another good one. Okay, so now buyers have it. Kind of this kind of deal here, right? At some point over here, we're recognizing a shift, right? And you see how these define, if we kind of say, here's a shift point from bull to bear, it worked. Here's a shift point from bear to bull, it worked. Here's a shift point from bull to bear. It worked, right? Now, you're not going to believe me when I say this. I despise diagonal trend lines. I despise them. There's so much discretion involved. Should we have treated this like this? A little too zoomed out, in my opinion, right? There's rotations that we can see and little shifts that we can see. So it requires discretion